start
well, thank you to you guys and to everybody who's signing on. We're so grateful for you to be here with us. Our presenters today are Debbie Rosen and Lindsey Thoms. They are the owners of the StudyPro, which is an executive function and study skills center in McLean, Virginia. The StudyPro works with students to help them better manage the process of school, which means helping students become better planners, time managers, initiators, organizers, and completers of work. Most students aren't taught these skills yet, but they are so deeply needed to be successful at school and throughout their careers. And of course, it's especially important now for students to learn these skills or to brush up on these skills as they return to in-person learning after a year of virtual school. And the StudyPro has been a really important supporter of Chesterbrook and our PTA for years. And we are so grateful to Debbie and Lindsey for your ongoing support of our organization and our school. And we're grateful for your willingness to put on this presentation for us tonight. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. And we really appreciate everybody that has joined us, and for your patience. We're very sorry. So we'll kind of just jump right in. As Ann had said, my name is Debbie Rosen, and this is Lindsey Thoms here in the pink. And what we wanted to talk about tonight was, of course, helping build study and organizational skills. This is, because it's for Chesterbrook, it is intended more for an elementary school to early middle school audience, but really, to be honest, everything pertains to all levels of school. And really, to frame everything, what we talk a lot about is this difference between process and content, where the content is the math, the science, the history, and you can think of them really as verticals, and the process is that support system underneath. So it's how well can I find out what I have to do? How well can I read the directions and move forward? How well can I push through frustration? How well can I manage and plan my work? How well can I actually chunk my work up? And as we know, similar to ski hills, elementary is a little bit like green, middle school is a little bit like blue skiing, and the black levels requires a lot more skill. And so these are the types of skills, the process-based skills, that do become more demanding as we get older. And so that's what we want to talk a lot about, because we know a lot of the students have quite an intellect, but at the same time, that really, doesn't necessarily translate 100% into their ability to manage all of the work. And that's really a preview of everything that we're going to be talking about this evening. So if you're just joining us, we apologize for the link snafu, but we are just getting going, so you didn't miss anything. And what you're seeing here is really what we're going to be covering this evening, which is, how can we as parents create the right kind of scaffolding, or what we like to call as bumper lanes, to help our students transition from us being the executive function and masters of the study skills to them becoming them, and to create learned independence. And we do think that the concept of growth mindset matters a lot, and then how we praise and how we talk to our students matters a lot. So we're going to be covering that today. And I'm going to turn it over to Lindsey to talk a little bit about what executive functions really are.
And what Debbie was describing there, this difference between the process and the content, why we start here with just this broad overview of what executive functions are, because they are what allow us to do the process part of school. So what you see here on your screen are these 8 executive functions, and what they are, they're housed in your frontal lobe, and they are what give you and our students really the ability to control 3 things. And so keep this in mind as you look at these, that it controls your abilities, your thoughts, it starts there. And it also controls your ability to control your emotions, and then also your actions. And all 3 of those things are so linked together. And so when we talk about something about school and doing their homework or completing a task, all of those require these executive functions to control those thoughts that are going on, those emotions that are going on, and the actions and the behaviors that they're exhibiting in front of you. So as we go on to the next one, why we talk about these is because it is maturational. So what you see here on your screen here is this brain development. So as I described about the frontal lobe, that's the last part of your brain to develop. And it starts developing around toddler age, and it develops all through adolescence into their mid-20s, right during those critical school years. So what you're seeing here for some of your elementary or early middle school students is this peak time where we do see a lot of growth in that frontal lobe and their ability to use some of these executive functions. So keeping in mind that it's that ability to control those three things and that it's maturational. I'm going to shift here to this next slide to say that they are expected. You need them to do that process part of school, but they're not fully taught how to use those skills. So I'll let Debbie kind of chime in here a little bit about why that might be that struggle that we might be seeing is that transition in elementary and early middle school between that maturation that's happening and their ability to use those skills yet.
And a lot of times what we hear from parents is that my student really did well until, and I think if you can picture it, if you have a math worksheet or if you have, to read a chapter or take a small quiz, then it's something that with, the intelligence you can kind of master, intelligence alone, I should say. But as you can imagine, the extreme, if you're going to high school or college and you have very hefty chapters of history and you have multiple tests and you have projects and you have papers that are multi-steps, really it's not just about can I absorb by reading all of that information, the content starts to overwhelm the process. And so that's why it's so important to have kind of this imbalance. So that's just really what we're seeing here is that what happens, the question is what happens when we have this intellectual ability, but it's not kind of in sync with our ability to manage the process.
So you see here these executive functions listed here on your left, and I'll draw your attention to the study skills on the right. And there's a lot of overlap here. So there's these study skills that start to be expected more and more through later elementary and into middle school and certainly high school and beyond, such as managing your time. So your ability to manage your time requires these executive function skills. I have to be aware. I have to be able to shift from one task to another. As Debbie was describing, I might have to shift from that math worksheet. Now I might have to shift my attention to that English reading. So those are content skills that you need to do, but you need to use that executive function skill in order to accomplish that goal. So what you see on the right here, these study skills, these might change and they might develop as they get older. So it becomes a lot of note-taking, becomes a lot of how to prepare for a test as they get older and older. But what doesn't change is those executive functions on the left. Those are always needed to accomplish those goals and tasks. So that's why we begin to talk about it now, because keep in mind throughout this whole presentation, we're going to talk a lot about they need to use them and they need to use them before they're really fully developed. And they're going to use them a little bit poorly. So that's where we can help and support them as parents and educators surrounding them with the strategies until they're ready and matured enough to use them independently. So as we shift here, kind of the next one, that's this little image here to keep in mind that we want them to use them. The goal is to have them have this learned independence with the goal and objective of having less dependency on us as the adults around them. We don't want to be their time managers. We often become their frontal lobe. We often act as their frontal lobe because it can be a little bit more efficient in some cases. But the goal is, again, to help them shift to their use of these skills. And how we can do that is to support them with these bumper lanes and strategies, which we're going to go through next. We don't wait. So as we what I often share is that when that slide of the brain developing and with the knowledge of that frontal lobe developing into their mid-20s, I once had somebody ask us after a presentation, oh, that makes so much sense. So should I just wait until my middle schooler grows up a little bit more to have him clean his room? We don't wait. We scaffold with these strategies and structures that we can wrap around them. And that's what we're going to go into.
And as Lindsay said, the scaffolding, and we tried to create a picture a little bit that you can see the bumper lanes. When you think about all of the skills that we want to help our students develop, whether they're swimming or, artists or musicians or any types of athletes, we really want to scaffold them over time, right? We don't throw them in the Olympic pool right from the beginning. And I think it's really important to think about homework and study skills in the same way. That what we find more often than not is that it's really kind of counterintuitive, the things that students maybe don't know how to do. A lot of times they, we'll talk about tonight that the biggest challenges they have is really the idea of kind of getting started. And, there's also a lot of things that they maybe won't do naturally. So some students really won't take breaks naturally because they don't trust themselves to get started again. Some kids don't naturally organize their materials. We may be surprised as parents to find out that as their kids are getting more and more emails themselves directly from schools, or using digital organization more than physical organization, that they're really just not naming their files, and they have a very hard time figuring out where their files are. Another thing that we'll be talking about this evening is this idea of planning. And the whole idea of prioritizing some work over another is something that we think at this age is really important to do. And so we'll talk about that. And the whole point really of the slide is that all the things that are inside this bowling lane, if you will, in between the bumper lanes, are things that you can help your students do. So again, rather than throwing them in that Olympic pool, it's just your job to do homework, or it's my job to do all of your homework with you, that we can start to really separate and transfer that responsibility to the students. And underneath all of that is this idea of growth mindset, because as, again, we'll talk about a little bit later, we want students to remember that it's really about strategies and effort that will make us smart. And SMART, as you may know, if you're familiar with growth mindset, as we talk about it so much now as a, in the educational field, SMART is really a label that if you put that on someone, they don't have control of. And so we really want students to feel they have full control over how well that they perform. And if we say, boy, you're so smart, and then I don't do as well on a test, then I wonder to myself, am I really that smart? So we want to talk again about how can we help students do all of these things that we're talking, or how can you help your student do all of these things we're talking about? And it's really about building those process skills. And we can, as parents, take a very active role in allowing kids to feel very confident about the content and about getting their work done, but giving them those bumper lanes, giving them the infrastructure to really feel, that they're to help them in the areas that maybe they're not as confident in. So we're going to go ahead and start with some of those things, and we'll turn it over to Lindsey to talk about the first thing, which is building the right environment.
Yeah, and this is one that we're starting with because I'm sure over the past year and a half, almost 2 years with distance learning, the environment became a really prominent conversation in our households of how are we going to find the space for everybody to maybe work from home or have distance learning from home. And so what we found really as a net was that a lot of students were starting to work in their bedrooms younger and younger. So why we have some of these features here listed here, it's a good time now to kind of revisit where are our kids doing their homework, and are they doing it in the right environment that's best for them? And the advice that I'm going to give for every parent on here is that start with questioning versus telling. So what you might draw your attention to is the electronics. We all know that electronics are really hard to inhibit our impulses. If I see a Snapchat notification, I'm going to want to check it. My brain just isn't fully matured enough right now to resist that temptation. So what we want to do is find a home for those electronics, have a landing spot for those electronics. Now, if the conversation goes, you can't have your phone out when you're studying, you take it away, that's accomplishes one task if they don't have the electronics there, but it doesn't help develop the why behind it. They just might be like, mom and dad are so mean, or they're so strict with me, or none of my other none of my friends' parents actually care. That's what they could walk away from that kind of interaction with. But if we start with, here are some features that we know are great for how you can get your homework done. Ask them. Just be like, what do you notice about where you work that's really effective for you? And then start with a conversation there. Where we can lead to is some of these features here. Having that hard surface. So that means it's not their bed. Having good lighting. So maybe it is in the kitchen or the den or the dining room because there's big bright light there. Comfortable but not too comfortable chairs. That's, again, not a reason why they won't end up on their bed, making it more difficult to work. And then when it comes to electronics, you can start the conversation by giving some choices. Where do you think the best landing spot for your phone might be? Do we get a charging station? Should we plug it in the kitchen? Having those conversations with them can help lead them to understanding the why behind it. It's really hard to resist temptations right now. And some other features that what you're seeing here are some of the pictures from our center here in McLean, but having that timer so they can visualize time, and having what it comes with is this nice little whiteboard, which they can use for their homework. Math on a whiteboard is great, but what you see kind of small there is another smaller little whiteboard card that can give them a finish line of when they're done. So 30 minutes can seem like an overwhelming amount of time for a student if I can't picture what that time is. But if I know that I'm going to do problems 1 through 5, and then I have a break around at the latest 5:30, 6:30, then they can see that clear finish line, which makes it much easier to get started and much easier and less friction or fights at home to acknowledge from the get-go when we're done. Not even I'm just done after 30 minutes. It's here's how I can get it done. I can do these 5 problems and cross them off as I go. So that's why we start with the right environment, because it's a great place to start with your kids to have that conversation of what features are best for them to make it most effective. And then we'll kind of go into some of these other ones about once you have the right space, how are you going to actually use that space to get your homework done? So as we move on to the next one there.
And I just wanted to mention for those of you who might have joined us a little bit later, we did start a little bit late, so we're going to run a little bit late, and it will be recorded, and please ask any questions you have in the chat. So again, in terms of building the infrastructure, we want to have the right environment, but the other thing we want to do is really to help kids visualize, our students visualize time and know when they're going to do their homework. Again, this is a great opportunity. You know, us as parents often know our student schedule, but I remember the first time I did this with my daughter in 4th grade. You know, we went and I think to like Starbucks, and we pulled off the 24-hour calendar, which we have one online that you can download, and I'll actually put that in the chat right now so that you can download this blank calendar at your convenience if you'd like. But the point is that if you look at all the areas that are grayed out, those are the times you're sleeping, you're in school, you might have sports, you might have appointments. You even may want to gray out times that you know that they want to have their preferred activities. So maybe there are times that, you know, on Friday night, they're going to want to hang out with their friends. They're not going to want to be doing homework. So then what we do is look for that work windows or white space that is reserved for homework time so that you can see, because a couple of things are really important. One is for them to say, oh yeah, this is my calendar, my responsibility, this is for me. I'm starting to take that responsibility from you who tells me when every appointment is, and etc. And then the other is that if maybe, as you can see on this calendar, Thursday is a pretty busy day. If they have things that are due on Friday, they know, well, let's really, you know, take responsibility and start planning to get this done on Wednesday. So let's talk a little bit about planning and how can we as parents help students plan. I get very excited about planning. Every single day we have kids in our homework center, and we do this, essentially this plan with our students. And we talk to them about why it matters, because a list is not a plan. Because the reason is that a list doesn't help students understand when things are due. It doesn't help students understand what the priorities are. And it really doesn't cause them to really preview an assignment so that they know how big or small it is. As we're getting into middle school, you know, in 4th, 5th, 6th, and beyond, we're starting to get assignments that might surprise them. It's not just that math worksheet that's due the next day. So what we do at StudyPro every single day, and what we suggest for parents, is that we actually, if we're planning with our students, that you can print this off again. You can see the link, and Lindsay will share this with you as well, but the link is on the slide. And we go in the order that you see on this plan every single day. So with every student, we start with history. Why? Because, oh, I don't have any history. Well, invariably, you know what? Maybe there is some missing history. Maybe they do have history or social studies. And so we just get into the habit of going through every subject every time we sit down. And then we are very specific about what the assignment is. So it's not just math homework or study for tests. It's if it's math homework, what specific problems, so that we remember. If it's just the odd problems, we remember what page it is. Why is that? Because when students get tired, it's the end of the night, and they go back and they decided this is the third assignment that I'm going to work on tonight, they don't have to go back and recheck and go, oh my gosh, So once you have this whole plan filled out and you've previewed it, and we look and say, you know what, there's a video and questions. Well, that'll take about 5 minutes, really. So the video is 12 minutes long, or the video is 8 minutes long, and the questions, there's 3, but there's 3 parts of each. So the whole idea is that we try to be very specific, help them be specific. And it's not, well, you have to be more specific. Like, how can you kind of leave some breadcrumbs there for yourself, some ideas that make it easier for you to remember this later. But the magic of the plan really is then when you start to look at, how am I going to attack this work? So now it's all out of my brain, it's into the plan, and then we help order it based on, starting with something that's super easy. Why? Because we really want to help our students understand that, just like we're not going to just sprint off if we're running a race, we're going to start with something that's going to warm our brain up, which is also a muscle. Then we go to the most stressful, high priority assignment for us. Why? Because what will kids typically do is they'll wait until the end of the evening to do that when they're super tired. And, that makes it much harder for them. So when we order it, and I can't tell you the magic I see in some students' eyes when they're like, wow, this planning has really helped. And at the end of every one of the sessions, we're always asking students, what helped you? Because we want them to start building some self-awareness and, really understand what strategies, as Lindsey said, work for them. And a huge percentage of the time they say it's just having the plan, because now it's all out of their head. They don't have to worry that I forget something, or is there this huge thing. And the last thing I'll say is that a lot of times kids start with the thing they just remember first. And that doesn't necessarily mean that's the right way to start. And it's the easy, or it's the easiest, or it's the hardest, or it's the most important. And then they're stuck later on, oh yeah, I have this thing. Oh my gosh. And then they're tired. So this is a really great way and a great opportunity to chunk things up, which kind of leads me to the next slide and moving on to Lindsey.
Yeah, and just as Debbie was saying, that attacking the plan and the magic that happens from giving that order, because I think we all can relate to our priorities change when we're tired, when we're hungry, when we're stressed out. Anything that we might have intended to do can get shifted because the priorities change. So what our kids, with their frontal lobe, as it's developing, they're not going to prioritize assignments. That's just a fact. They can't see very much further into the future if it doesn't have some kind of novelty or preference or urgency. So that's what the planning can do. And so what can also help them, we're going to share this strategy that we use for those future assignments, that looking further into the future, is using this chunk it strategy, is giving them a really specific target that when they get a long-term paper project, they usually are given an assignment sheet or some kind of directions. What you see here is a little anagram that we help guide students to get to chunks. So they might even, at a very broad term, know the word chunking of making something smaller or setting little goals for themselves. But how do I do that? So first thing off the bat is just acknowledging, when is the due date? Let's put it in our planner. Let's put it on a calendar. Now let's get cut to the meat of what is important on this assignment sheet. Might be a lot of overwhelming filler information that's distracting, and it makes their brain kind of go a little haywire and want to put it off, to say, I can't do this all now, so I don't want to acknowledge it, and that's what can lead to that procrastination cycle. Once they've highlighted, gotten rid of that filler, highlighted on that meat or the key information, then they can create a checklist from those highlights and number them to say, okay, maybe I have 5 chunks that I have to do. And I might have 5 days, so I can do 1 a day. This helps them feel in control and more empowered to get started. And that's really the goal. All of us parents, all the parents here tonight might be thinking, they know what they have to do, but they're just not getting started. This is a way that as a parent, you can remind them, okay, well, let's just look at the directions and let's just highlight some of this key information. Let's just find out what this means together. And that's that first important step. And then what we have, we'll go to the next slide here and show you that what you do with those chunks can be put on a calendar like this. And what I'll describe here is maybe 2 students that some might sound familiar to some of you, but both have executive function, developmental challenges going on, and they need strategies. And one might be that student who gets a project and immediately wants to go and buy those materials. Get the cute poster board, want to get the new markers, want to get the stickers. They have a great vision for their plan. And then you might see that project stall. That, okay, you've had 2 weeks for this project, we got all the materials, and now what? That's because that novelty, the excitement of getting those materials help them start, but they don't have a chunked plan to follow through on. But then the opposite can be true. A student might be running up to you and Staples closes in 10 minutes and they're saying, I have this project and it's due tomorrow and I got to make this poster board and we got to go out and get all these materials. So both of those students are students that need strategies to support it. So start with that chunk it strategy of highlighting that key information. Let's read the directions and then putting those chunks somewhere. And so the classic somewhere is a calendar like what you see on the screen here. But there's other ways to chunk it up, and this is literally what I use sitting in front of me here. So even just putting it on little sticky notes like this. But let's get our chunks together and let's just pick one of the sticky notes off the wall a day to get started. I want to acknowledge that some students might resist chunking in this way because it feels like maybe 10,000 little paper cuts that they're going to have to initiate each one of those times. So calendaring is great, but also know that there's other options too to achieve the same goal of chunking those goals up smaller and then just helping them initiate on each one of those smaller goals. And that's what we can support with a lot of strategies there too. And what you see here is first acknowledging where their challenges might be with initiation. This is a conversation that you can have with your students that reduces the barrier or that wall that might go up, that protective wall that says, you don't think I can do it? I know about the science project. Like I'm sure in households, everybody has heard that before is, I don't need to be reminded about the science project. I know about it. And that might be true. Here are some other barriers that we discuss with our students of what might be getting in the way, what does make it harder. And it's a very, very rewarding conversation to have if their parents acknowledge that, hey, yeah, it is harder to get started because it's worth so many points. This feels like such a big part of the grade. My teacher was stressing that it was going to be 50% of this quarter's grade. I'm feeling overwhelmed with getting it right or perfect. Or I'm just assuming it's going to take a really long time to finish. So that's starting with these conversations can help find the right solution or the strategy to pair with these. So that's then the next step that we can take. This is a great slide for parents to just consider snapshotting, screenshotting. As Debbie said, we're going to share the slides, but the takeaway from what you see here is, as parents, remind them of a strategy, don't remind them of the assignment. When we remind them of the assignment, you get that, I know, I'm doing it, I'm gonna do it. And I'm sure all of us have had that student promise when you've stayed up all night, really late, way past their bedtime, finishing up a project or a long-term assignment, and they promise to never do it again. Next time I'm going to start earlier. They genuinely mean it. That's not just words. They genuinely mean it. But what's different is they need a strategy to do that. So this is what you can remind them. Instead of saying, hey, you got that science project to do, you'd be like, okay, why don't we just try closing all other tabs and let's just open up a Google Slides doc. What's a good title to call it? Let's pick your favorite font or what's your favorite background? I like you really neutral. What do you like? Getting them started that way, you will have more success than if you just remind them about that science project. That's what can put the barrier up. So all of these that you see here on your screen are quick, less than 30 seconds. Some are less than 10. All of these will help them get started, feel the motivation that then can sustain their ability to complete that task. So we share this with you to help you find there. And then why I laugh here, Debbie smiles as I say, initiation is such a needed skill. So that's a theme of what you're hearing here. We also definitely know that taking breaks is a really, really good strategy to sustain focus and attention. Now, you might have two extreme camps of students here too, is we might have the students who take really long extended breaks to delay and procrastinate, or you might have the student that resists taking breaks because they don't trust their ability to get restarted here. So when we're looking for the features of a break and what we do to support kids here is one is making it very time bound. Making it very time bound, like 5 minutes, and things that can be done in 5 minutes. And what we talk to them about is, Electronics are designed to suck you in for hours. There's nothing on your phone or electronics or a video game that you can do in 5 minutes. It will suck you in the rabbit hole. It'll take longer to finish your homework. Something that is time-bound helps them re-energize, refocus. Feature of getting away from their screen and standing up are the two main ones that we have. But you see some ideas here. Again, not to remind them, hey, take a break. Say, okay, well, what do you think would be a good one for this break? Do you want to take a little short walk, or should we refill your water bottle? Giving them that choice of two can help them more initiate. And I will, so Cindy, I laugh at your comment here about choosing fonts, because I agree with you that that's why it's so good to have these conversations with your student to help them initiate. There's some students that I say formatting's got to come last, because it can lead to a very long time. But if the start is, hey, let's get it down, let's bullet point 3 ideas, then maybe choose a font. 3 more ideas, oh, then choose your background. That might be a good pathway there, but I agree, yes, there's some of those things that they can spend hours kind of switching back between Comic Sans and like Helvetica, just trying to choose the font that they like best. But I'll kind of wrap up this little section here, but just saying, as parents, these are the bumper lanes that we're talking about. Planning that Debbie mentioned, help giving them the bumper lanes of how to chunk down a long-term assignment, then what to do with those chunks, and then how to initiate on those chunks.
Yeah, and it really is a lot about getting to know your student. And, you know, a lot of what we try to do is to take the work out of kind of their classic work environment. So, you know, print it off and highlight something, or use one of those little whiteboards. One of the things that we do often is create just something on a whiteboard that helps them. So if it's trying to get going with math, it's like, okay, just pick a number. You know, if they have 10 problems, pick a number between 1 and 10. Number 2, okay, we're going to start with that. Put it on the whiteboard, and then when you're done, just erase that and then let us know. Or let's put these, you know, 1 to 10 in kind of crazy ways, like 2, 8, 9, right? As long as it's not something that's going to be confusing to them with the way the math is set up. But the other thing with writing, a lot of times kids have a really hard time initiating with writing. So we use those whiteboards and we put just a circle in the middle and we say, okay, we had a student who had to write a paper the other day, and she knew what the paper was about, but she didn't kind of know how to start. So we just said, okay, so if I said to you, forget you know anything about this, you know, it's about this princess and the frog, what would you say? Well, who's the princess, or where are they, or things like that. So we start to write those questions down, then we just put them in order, and then it becomes kind of the outline for the paper if it was, you know, a short story about a princess and a frog in that case. So a lot of what we're trying to do with initiation, and, you know, again, going back to that idea of bumper lanes and about scaffolding and how we can help with the process, is really by planning and by helping them plan, by helping them, you know, as Lindsay said, understand the time they have and plan and initiate and take breaks. You know your child best. You know, those are the types of things we're trying to do versus, okay, let's sit down and, you know, what's this problem? And, you know, and really just work on the content with them, which makes them hopefully doesn't, but it can easily make them dependent on adults for the content piece, which is really what we want to get away from. Which kind of gets us into the second half. And don't forget, there is a chat if you'd like to ask questions, so please do. You've probably a lot of you have heard about the idea of growth mindset. So what I wanted to share a little bit is how we talk to our students about it. So we teach a course on growth mindset and middle school, or getting ready for middle school study skills. And one of the things we help them understand is that, you know, why does it matter to have a growth mindset? Why does it matter to try things that are hard, that are out of our comfort zone? Why does it matter to have respect for effort? A lot of times kids believe by the time they get to 4th grade that if I have to put effort into something, if I have to work hard at it, it means that I'm not smart. That means that I'm not, you know, I finished those 10 questions in 5 minutes. That's the best thing. But really what we want them to understand is learning and stretching is really what makes us smart. And the reason is this. So if you look at this little chart here on the left where it says don't, no, there's this cycle. So if you think about, you know, how our students learn things like math or history or social studies or English or anything, or how to read and write, any part of it, they don't know. And then they know. So they don't know how to add, but then they learn how to add. And the minute they learn how to add, or the minute they learn anything, the teacher's going to give them something they don't know. So then they learn how to do that. So subtract, then they don't know, then they know that, then they don't know maybe how to multiply, then they maybe know, and then they don't know how to divide, and you understand. If every time we didn't know something, we didn't learn it quickly, you can imagine how awful we would think that we were at things pretty quickly. And so, that's what causes us to not want to kind of try harder things and to expand ourselves and to take risks. So we want kids to say, look, your job as a student is to not know things. That's why you're here. We want you to understand that our potential, as it says here on the right, is to develop skills over time by asking the right questions and by making mistakes. And of course, mistakes are another word for learning. And so as parents, what can we do to help develop a growth mindset? You may have seen this before, chart before too, but really the main point is that in a learning zone, which should be like 95% of the time, it's when they're at practice for their games, it's when they're doing any kind of homework or anything. It's really all the times other than when they're taking the test. You want them to feel very comfortable and secure that they can make mistakes. And if they get something wrong, then it's not about, oh, you got that wrong. It's more about like, okay, so, how many edits can you find? How many things you can circle things in this paper of words that you might want to think about changing the spelling, or you might want to upgrade, or, ways instead of like, oh, that doesn't sound good. That word doesn't sound good, or going through and editing the paper themselves. Really, it's time in the learning zone to practice and to take risks. And, if we have our students think that unless something's perfect when they turn it in, then they're going to get something bad's going to happen. Then they're never going to want to try these things that, are hard. And the first time it's never going to be perfect, because go back to that no, don't know, right? Nothing that we've gotten great at as adults, we're perfect the first time we did it. So we have to expect mistakes, right? You can't make every basket you try. So the whole idea that we really want to kind of remind all of you is that, we as parents are really responsible for that bottom line on the slide, is that the consequences shouldn't be significant if they make a mistake. And in fact, there's a lot of people that talk about celebrating mistakes as being, wow, look at that, you made a mistake. And I've tried that with my own daughter, who was very sensitive to making mistakes. And I think over time it's really worked by just celebrating the fact that, because they really want to please you. And if you say, that's amazing, you got it right the first time, you're the fastest to get it right, then, that if they don't, then what's going to happen? They're going to really, I think, struggle. And so what we have here on the left, and usually the slides builds, but it doesn't build here in Easy Webinar, is that the idea is that if we think that all of our intelligence is really, what matters to us and how smart and how fast, then we have this fixed mindset, and it's something we just can't control. And so if I just think I'm amazing at math, and I've been told my whole life I'm so smart at math, and these are those labels I'm carrying around, but then I don't do well in the test, as I said earlier, then, I'm afraid of losing it. So all of the research around fixed and growth mindset pretty much showed that for kids who were told, you're so smart, you're so talented, they really were very reticent, and actually statistically chose not to take risks and try things that were more challenging. Where when it was like, oh, wow, this is going to be so fun, I get to try something new, I get to make some mistakes, I know I can control my growth, my effort. And we see, high school students in our center, and in fact, college students all the time, they always have to be out of their comfort zone, because every one of those honors and AP and just even high school level classes are really challenging. And, studying for multi-chapter unit tests and doing projects about things. Even my daughter just did something around the war in Afghanistan in 8th grade, and all of this is really challenging. And so what we can say is on the right, if what they can say to themselves with the growth mindset is, if I didn't do well, I just need to try harder. I need to find different strategies. Maybe I just don't understand it well enough yet. What are the strategies that I can use? So again, it's all about effort and strategies, and helping them understand that they're tied to overcoming obstacles and overcoming the friction they might find as they're doing work.
Yeah. And that's exactly what Debbie was just describing, is how can we do this? Is for us as parents and surrounding and supporting those kids, what we can do is be mindful of our language. Our language does matter. So are we praising their ability of smart or talented, or are we praising their effort or their use of strategies or their perseverance overcoming those obstacles? So how we can kind of be mindful, we have some examples here on the next slide of how we might be praising. What do? We very well-meaningly might say, like, great job, you're so smart at this. That must feel so great. We mean to validate really the effort that they put into there. So you see here on this right-hand column is some ways to validate and praise the effort, the process part of it. What did they do to accomplish that goal? So what we were doing then is reinforcing that use of those frontal lobe and executive functions there for their continued use in the future. So what I always like to add in here, that first example, the great job, you must have worked really hard. If you can point out any strategy or effort specifically that they use, they will be way more likely to use that in the future. So I love my job for this. We have the opportunity to do this very often with our students. And the other day I got to say this for a student who had a project, had a paper. It was the last minute. He was feeling the stress and the pressure of submitting it last minute. We worked on it and he got it in, but then I got to back up and praise and say, I can see the effort that you put into this without me because you used that chunk it strategy. He had done that on his own. He had highlighted the key information. He created a checklist. He had set some goals for himself. That's what I wanted to water. That's what I wanted to say, hey, that was a great job of the effort that you used that chunk it strategy. I see that you highlighted that key information. Did you find it easier to get started once you did that? Or how did that benefit you? And he's like, it was much easier to get started. That's what I want him to leave that conversation on. Not that you worked so hard at the last minute and got it in. That, because if you ask a lot of students, they just say, yeah, I don't know what worked. This is how we can praise some of that effort that we're seeing and use of strategies to help develop that growth mindset, and then tangentially developing their frontal lobe and their use of their executive functions there as well. So I kind of hinted of, we really do, no matter how small, want to water some of those seeds of growth or use of strategies that we see from our kids there.
Yeah, and one of the things that you hear a lot when you read about the growth mindset is when a student does so well in a test, we always say, oh my gosh, that's amazing. I'm so glad you got an A or you did 100, But what we really want to say is, wow, what strategies did you use when you studied? And did you, what test taking strategies did you use? Were you, you must have been really thoughtful while you were taking the test, or things that, really trying to understand for them, what they did to do so well. It's great to respond as we would all as parents, like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. Because we're all happy when we hear that, but really just trying to dig underneath and just start that self-reflection is so important right now, for what we know is of course coming. And so we've talked a little bit about this concept of watering the seeds and not the weeds. And I just want to spend a moment on it as we're kind of wrapping up, because, we all swell with pride as adults and feel great when we are complimented and, when we feel that we did something well. And we want to do those things again, as Lindsey said. And I think that what we see again in the center with all the kids that we work with is that, we try to meet them where they are and be very, very positive. And regardless of what happened in their day or how much missing work they might have, we're really, just giving them praise for showing up. And we're trying to water the seeds of the things that we want to grow in our children. And I'll call them our children because for the moments that they're with us, they are our children too. And so we always talk about that with parents, because there's really no piece of homework that is worth any type of challenge in the relationship that you have with your students. And so we really do want to remember to think about these types of things and how important it is to water those attributes and the strategies and the effort and those things that will build the growth mindset and will build a student that feels comfortable making mistakes. And so, again, as we wrap up, and we're happy to take questions if you wanted to put them in the chat. we just wanted to summarize some of the things that we were talking about in terms of building executive function, study skills, and a growth mindset for students, which is, if there are the challenges with kind of homework or school-oriented behavior, if you will, or how students are doing, it's really looking at the need behind the behavior. Sometimes you'd be so surprised at why students don't do certain things, rush through work, or have a hard time getting started. We find sometimes just choices are challenging for kids. So they have a choice of 3 things and they just don't know how to choose. They get a little bit paralyzed. So again, that scaffolding idea of really just eliminating one and then highlighting a couple, and worst comes to worst, pick one behind your back or something. Taking a piece of paper, if they don't know how to organize it, something they've written, and literally cutting it up and moving the pieces around, and using the whiteboards and things that we can do, strategies we can use to help them. And look at, it's not just the fact that they don't want to start. It's not that they're a problem, it's that they're having a problem, and that's the key. And as we talked about, really lowering the consequences of making a mistake, I always talk about this amazing TED Talk by Rita Pierson, Every Child Deserves a Champion, or something very similar, and we're happy to send the link out. But she really talks about a story where a student in her class had taken a test and he got a 2, and he came to her and he said, "Miss Pearson, how come you gave me a smiley face when I got a 2? And she said, "Well, you're going to do better next time, aren't you?" And, and it wasn't a 0. So that's something to start with. And I think, I've really tried to do that with my own children, and I find that it really does work, because they're beating themselves up and they really want to please you. So I think that's something that's always an important part to remember. And as Lindsey talked about, praising the effort and helping them really build the systems and be those bumper lanes for them.
Yeah, and that's with the takeaways here is, we know in that fast-paced, high-stakes world, as a parent, we forget sometimes about that this whole part of growing up is to learn and learn from mistakes here. So that watering the seeds, no matter how small they might be, hey, back to Cindy, if it might have taken them 15 minutes one day to choose a font and the next day it was down to 10, that's a little seed that might just be a little watering there, that, hey, I noticed today that you seem to find an easier time picking that font to get started. That's what we mean by watering. And no matter how small or the nugget is, we want to reinforce what we see them doing right, or any small improvement there. And then, as Debbie was mentioning, that relationship with your child is first and foremost, and nothing matters more than that, especially a test grade. And reminding them of the stakes does not help their brain think more clearly or more directly or more focused. We can lower the stakes there and help them be able to access and use the strategies on that test more effectively, to the best of our ability there. And then we add this last one here, is letting them fail early and often is how they learn and how their brain is going to develop. So you think of those executive functions that can help us manage our time. I think we can all remember a learning experience from a time that we didn't manage our time so well. And we were late for an event, or we were too jam-packed and squeezed there. The takeaway that we can have there is, okay, what did that feel like? What contributed to me being late or not squeezing in my time well? Those failures in that supportive environment will help them build that resilience that we know that they're going to need long term, and to be that functioning, happy, healthy, well-adjusted adult in the future many years from now. But it does start now, and it starts with how we might be providing some of that support and those bumper lanes that we were discussing earlier.
And so we really just end by saying that especially as kids get older, grades really do become dependent as much as on process as it does on intellect. So one has nothing to do with another, which is kind of how we started. And that's why we think it's so important to really start building some of these skills now. And then we'll just close up by sharing a couple of things. We do a lot of free webinars. One is that we have coming up on October 27th. We call it the Power Panel idea, because all 3 of these individuals who are part of this, if you're in this neighborhood, you probably know Dr. Kathy McCarthy. Dr. Jonathan Dalton is a specialist, CAPC. He's a psychologist and a specialist in anxiety and school refusal. He actually was a founder of of the Center for Anxiety and Behavior Change, and Dr. Maria Zamiti is the founder and owner of Georgetown Psychology Group, and also New Helix Center, which is an IOP, an outpatient, intensive outpatient center that just opened up in McLean. And so all of them are going to talk a lot about how can we as parents be the best that we can be amidst everything that's been going on. And I know it's been hard. So we're very excited to have the three of them in, I guess, next week, or a little bit over a week from tomorrow. And then we do free growth mindset workshops. We have three of them in the fall/winter. We just did the math one. We have the pushing through frustration that's coming up, and it's free. So we would encourage you to, if you liked what we said about growth mindset and you have a 4th and 5th grader, we really would love for you to see you there. It's on our website. You can take a screen grab here. And then finally, please come visit us. We're right in the neighborhood, and we'd love to hear from you. So I'll leave that on this. So you can always get a hold of us at info@StudyPro. And thank you so much for your comments here. If you do have any questions, let me know. I do see one about, can you share some strategies for working with forgetful or easily distracted kids, like ones who always forget to turn their Thursday folders or need lots of reminders?
And so, Katie, can I ask, are you asking on behalf of a parent who's supporting the student remembering to bring the folder and turn it in when they get to school? Or is this from the lens of maybe a teacher who might be trying to support the student submitting it? So I ask because really from parent, okay, so getting it into the backpack and then remembering to get it into school. So what you might, as all strategies should, start with that conversation of the kid is, yes, when you're not there, exactly. So thinking about that, what can help a distracted or forgetful student is point of performance intervention. So when do they actually have to turn that in? So is there something external, like an alarm on their phone or a pop-up on their computer or anything that happens at the moment that they have to turn that in? So think of it there, and then kind of work backwards to, is it not making it in to the backpack? So do we have a landing or a home spot for it at home that it's either in the backpack or it's in that bin? And if it's in the bin, then I know it needs to be in the backpack. If it's the backpack, I know it needs to be in the bin, something like that. And then other ways to consider, like novelty. For some of those recurring habits that we want to instill in our kid, is there anything novel that we can add to that folder? Like this week, we're going to put this kind of sticker in, or I'm going to write on it in whiteboard marker if it's a laminated folder or some kind of plastic folder, or I'm going to write a joke on it or a knock-knock joke. And when you get to school, you can't read it until you get to school. And then you got to pull it out of your backpack and read the knock-knock joke, something like that. So there are going to be a couple of different approaches that you might take, but it depends on where the barrier is for that student. Is it remembering to get it in the backpack or turn it in? But happy to go further if there's any more context there. But usually to turn it in, yeah. So thinking about what could happen, having him or her walk through their day, like, tell me, what does it look like on Thursday folder? Like, what class do you start with? Are you always in the same homeroom? What does that look like? What's going on? Is it in Miss room and she's playing music, or is it in Miss room and it's totally quiet? If they can visualize and walk through what those environments are, you might, as the parent, be able to just really suss out, to use their language, what might be the barrier. So it might be that, like, every other day of the week, they go and put their backpack one place. But on Thursdays, they actually need to access their backpack in their homeroom to pull it out. So I think maybe start the conversation by asking them to, like, paint the picture of what their Thursday looks like to them. And doing it in a very neutral time when they haven't forgotten it is the best opportunity. Like, if you do it on Thursday this week and when they've forgotten it, they're going to actually put up a pretty strong emotional barrier because they're protective, because they're embarrassed they did it. They don't want to forget it every week. But if you talk about it on a Sunday, then you can kind of lead to it, the strategy being implemented on that Thursday.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, and thanks for your comments. We will send this out and all the links that we sent in the chat, so everybody has that. And we really appreciate your patience with us, especially since we had an issue with the link that we still cannot understand. I guess there was one quick question. Can we speak quickly on how to help older kids who have developed too much independence? That maybe, KRT, I think what we're going to do is you can email info, which is Lindsey and I, and we would be happy to chat with you about that. But I think right now we're going to let Anne say goodbye.
Thank you so much, Debbie and Lindsey. This was a wonderful presentation. I know I echo the comments of everybody in the chat. I found this so helpful, and we appreciate your ongoing support of Chesterbrook so much and our parents community. So thank you so much. Everybody have a good night.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.